Sometimes life changes in less than a minute. What seems like an ordinary moment explodes into chaos, leaving you questioning everything you thought you knew. In my case, it was in the 20 seconds the elevator took to ascend from the first floor to my seventh floor apartment, transforming a routine grocery run into a descent into terror. One whispered warning, one folded note, and suddenly the walls of my safe world began to crack, revealing shadows that had been lurking all along. But as I stood there, heart pounding, I had no idea that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would unravel my family, my trust, and the very fabric of my existence. The day started innocently enough. I, Era Sterling, a widow in my late 60s, had spent the morning at the local market, picking out the freshest cuts of beef and vegetables for the Sunday pot roast I planned to make. My granddaughter was coming over, and I could already envision her giggling as she helped set the table, the aroma of herbs filling my cozy apartment in Whispering Pines condominium. This towering building had been my home for over 30 years, a place of predictable routines, where the elevator's gentle hum was as comforting as an old friend's voice. But comfort, I would soon learn, is often just an illusion. Laden with heavy grocery bags, I stepped into the elevator on the ground floor, pressing the button for 7. The doors slid shut with a soft whoosh, enclosing me in that familiar metal box lined with mirrors that reflected my tired but content face. I leaned against the wall, shifting the weight of the bags, my mind wandering to the family recipe I'd perfected over decades. The ascent was slow, the floor numbers lighting up one by one. 1, 2, 3. Everything felt normal, almost boring, until the elevator jolted to a stop on the 4th floor. The doors parted, and in stepped Lionel Evans, my new neighbor. He was a quiet man in his 50s with a soft voice and a polite nod whenever our paths crossed in the hallway. We'd exchanged nothing more than pleasantries, comments on the weather or the building's finicky mail delivery. But that afternoon, he was different. His eyes avoided mine, darting to the corners like a hunted animal. His breathing was ragged, uneven, and his hands trembled as he reached for the button panel. Sweat glistened on his forehead and a faint tremor ran through his frame, as if he were carrying an invisible burden. I felt a prickle of unease, like a cold draft slipping under a door. The doors began to close, sealing us in together. That's when it happened. Lionel leaned in, subtly, his movements quick and deliberate. He slipped a small folded note into my hand, his fingers brushing mine with an icy touch that sent a shiver racing up my arm. I looked up, confusion knitting my brows, ready to ask what on earth was going on. But he met my gaze for the briefest second, his eyes wide with raw panic, and mouthed the words, "Don't say anything." My pulse quickened, thundering in my ears like a distant storm approaching. Without thinking, I unfolded the note in the dim glow of the overhead light. The words were scrawled in hurried blue ink. "Fake sick and get out of here fast." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. A joke? Some absurd prank? My first impulse was to laugh it off, to dismiss it as the eccentricity of a reclusive neighbor. But then I saw his face, pale as death, tense lines etched deep like a man staring down the barrel of a gun. No, this was no game. Something inside me, a primal instinct, screamed to trust him, to act before it was too late. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing the rising terror. What unseen danger was closing in? Was it in this elevator with us, or waiting just beyond? I didn't know, but the fear in Lionel's eyes was contagious, infecting me like a virus. Clutching my chest, I let out a gasp, swaying dramatically as if the world were spinning. "Oh, dear God," I mumbled, my voice quivering with genuine dread mixed with feigned weakness. "I don't feel well. My head, it's spinning." Lionel didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand against the emergency button, the elevator grinding to a halt between floors with a metallic groan that reverberated through the shaft. The doors didn't open fully. They jammed halfway, creating a narrow gap. With surprising strength, he pried them apart further, his muscles straining. "Get out, Miss Sterling," he whispered, his voice low and commanding, laced with urgency. "Now." Trembling, I dropped my grocery bags, apples tumbling, cans clattering across the floor, and squeezed through the opening. My knees buckled as I stumbled into the hallway, leaning against the wall to steady myself. The cool air hit me like a slap, but it did nothing to quell the adrenaline surging through my veins. Through the closing gap, our eyes locked one final time. In his gaze, I saw not just fear, but a haunting farewell, a man who knew he was sacrificing himself. The doors snapped shut with finality, and the elevator continued its descent, carrying Lionel into the unknown. I stood there, chest heaving, the hallway stretching out empty and silent around me. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of the bizarre encounter. Why me? What had Lionel seen or known that made him risk everything to warn a near stranger? The note burned in my palm, a tangible reminder that this wasn't over. But before I could gather my thoughts, sirens wailed from below, their piercing cries echoing up the building's walls like a harbinger of doom. From my 7th-floor window, I watched the scene unfold in the parking garage. Police cars screeching to a halt, lights flashing in chaotic strobes, an ambulance pulling up, paramedics dashing out with stretchers. Neighbors spilled from their apartments, clustering in the hallways with wide-eyed alarm. The elevator stuck between floors. Someone yelled from below, "There's blood! God, there's so much blood!" My legs turned to jelly. I wanted to rush down to demand answers, but terror pinned me in place. Instead, I slumped in the hallway, the note clutched like a lifeline. Lionel's face flashed before me, his trembling hands, his silent plea. What horror had he tried to shield me from? And why did it feel like the building itself was holding its breath, concealing secrets in its very bones? A sharp knock in my door jolted me from my stupor. "Ms. Era Sterling?" An urgent voice called. I opened it to a police officer, his uniform crisp, eyes sharp with scrutiny. "Yes, officer, what's happening?" "Were you in the elevator with the victim?" He flipped open a notepad. "Victim? What happened to him?" "He was found deceased, attacked. Looks like foul play." The words landed like blows. Deceased? I was just with him, felt the desperation in his touch. I recounted the events haltingly, the note, my fake illness, his insistence, but I omitted the full message, some inner voice urging caution. As the officer departed, leaving me in the echoing silence of my apartment, insomnia gripped me. Shadows danced on the walls, every creak amplifying my paranoia. I unfolded the note again under the lamp's glow, hoping for clarity, but turning it over revealed more. Faint blue ink scrawled, "Don't trust anyone in the building." A chill snaked down my spine. Don't trust anyone? This building was my world. Doris on 5, always cadging sugar with a wink, the bickering Peterson twins, even Kendra, my daughter-in-law on 8, with whom I'd clashed over my husband's inheritance just days ago. Her insistence on selling the family land, her cold eyes gleaming with ambition. Could the threat be from within? Dawn broke, but sleep never came. The police returned, probing deeper. I played ignorant, but resolve hardened in me. I'd unearth the truth myself. Stepping into the hallway, I felt invisible eyes tracking my every move. The elevator doors loomed like a tomb. What secrets did they hide? And who among my friends was a wolf in sheep's clothing? As I descended the stairs, a whisper of dread followed. This was no isolated incident. Lionel's warning had opened the door to darkness, and something, or someone, was waiting on the other side. In the dead of night, when the world outside your window fades to black and the only sound is the relentless ticking of a clock, that's when the real monsters emerge. Not from under the bed, but from the depths of your own mind. For me, Era Sterling, that night after the elevator incident was a descent into a waking nightmare where every shadow whispered accusations and every creak echoed like a footstep drawing closer. I thought the danger was confined to that metal box, that as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I realized it had followed me home, seeping through the cracks in the walls of whispering pines. And the worst part? The note's warning echoed in my ears. Don't trust anyone in the building. If the threat was inside these very halls, then nowhere was safe, and no one was innocent. The days following Lionel's death blurred into a haze of unease and isolation. The building, once a comforting hive of familiar faces and routines, now felt like a labyrinth of suspicion. Doors slammed shut a little too quickly, curtains twitched as I passed by windows, and the elevators, now repaired but forever tainted, became a place I avoided at all costs, opting instead for the dimly lit stairwells. Every ascent or descent left me glancing over my shoulder, feeling phantomized boring into my back. Neighbors I'd known for decades offered smiles that didn't reach their eyes, their greetings laced with an undercurrent of curiosity, or worse, calculation. Was it paranoia? Perhaps, but Lionel's fear was real, and it had infected me like a plague. Sleep was a distant memory. That first night I tossed in my bed, the sheets twisting around me like restraints. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lionel's pale face, his trembling hand slipping me the note. What had he known? Why me? The questions gnawed at me, relentless like a dripping faucet in the quiet hours. By dawn, exhaustion had me pacing the apartment, the note unfolded on the kitchen table like a talisman. Don't trust anyone. The words mocked me. Doris from the 5th floor, with her endless requests for sugar and her prying questions, could she be involved? The Peterson twins, whose heated arguments often spilled into the halls, were they hiding something behind their bluster? And Kendra, my daughter-in-law, living just 1 floor above with my son Darius. Our recent argument over Marcus's inheritance replayed in my mind, her sharp words, her insistence on selling the family land for practical reasons, her eyes flashing with something that now seemed less like frustration and more like malice. The police returned that morning, their knocks echoing through the hallway like judgments. The lead detective, a weary man named Harlan with deep lines etched into his face and a notebook perpetually in hand, greeted me with a nod that felt more interrogative than sympathetic. "Miss Starling, we need to ask a few more questions," he said, stepping inside without an invitation. His partner, a younger officer with a stern jaw, lingered by the door, eyes scanning my living room as if searching for clues. I led them to the couch, my hands clasped to hide their tremor. "Of course, detective. Anything to help." Harlan flipped open his notebook, his gaze piercing. "You mentioned you barely knew Lionel Evans. Is that accurate?" "Yes," I replied, though doubt crept in. Had I seen him more than I realized? Just hallway pleasantries. "Interesting," he murmured, his pen scratching across the page. "Because we found your name in his apartment, written on a sheet of paper. Era Sterling, 7th floor. Next to it, 2 other names, crossed out." My breath caught. "My name? Are you sure?" He nodded, watching me closely. "Positive. Any idea why he'd have it? Enemies? Disputes?" I shook my head, feigning bewilderment, but inside a storm raged. Lionel had targeted me specifically, not randomly, but with purpose. "No enemies that I know of," I said softly, "but it seems like I might have some." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't press. As they left, he added over his shoulder, "Be careful, Miss Sterling. This doesn't feel like a random attack." The door clicked shut, leaving me in silence that pressed down like a weight. If my name was in his apartment, what else had he known about me? And who had crossed out those other names, like victims marked off a list? The building's atmosphere grew thicker that afternoon, as if the walls themselves were conspiring. I ventured down to the lobby, drawn by the murmur of voices. A cluster of neighbors had gathered, their faces a mix of shock and gossip. Doris spotted me first, her eyes lighting up with that familiar nosy gleam. "Era, did you hear?"
That poor man in the elevator, he was an accountant, worked for someone right here in the building. A chill slithered on my spine. Who? She leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Kendra Reed, up on the 8th floor. Your daughter-in-law, isn't it? The words hit like a punch. Kendra? My mind spun. Lionel? Her accountant? The pieces were connecting, but the picture they formed was murky, threatening. I nodded numbly, excusing myself before the questions could pour in. Back in my apartment, suspicion festered. Kendra had always been ambitious, her marriage to Darius seeming more like a strategic alliance than a love match. And now this, Lionel tied to her, dead after warning me. That evening, resolve overrode fear. I climbed the stairs to the 8th floor, each step echoing my pounding heart. Darius answered the door with a tired smile, his face lined with the stress of his corporate job. Mom, what a surprise. Come in. The apartment was immaculate, as always, Kendra's touch, no doubt. She emerged from the bedroom in a silk robe, her smile cold and calculated. Mother-in-law, to what do we owe this honor? I chose my words carefully, perching on the edge of a chair. I wanted to ask if you'd heard about the elevator incident. Terrible business. Her eyes flickered, but she composed herself quickly. Yes, dreadful. That man, he was my accountant, actually. Handled some minor finances, nothing important. She avoided my gaze, busying herself with a glass of wine. Darius frowned. Mom, don't start digging. It's probably just a coincidence. But it wasn't. Her tone, evasive and too casual, set alarms blaring in my head. Enemies, I pressed gently. He seemed scared. She shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. People like him always have enemies. I'm not surprised he ended up that way. I left soon after, my heart racing. There was something off in her certainty, as if she knew more, perhaps too much. Back home, I rifled through Marcus's old documents, my late husband's files gathering dust in a forgotten drawer. Amid the yellowed papers, I found a sheet with a name underlined, Lionel Evans. In the margin, in Marcus's handwriting, tell if something happens to me. My blood turned to ice. Lionel knew Marcus? Had he been watching me over my husband's orders? And Kendra? What role did she play in this web of travail? Midnight brought no peace. Unable to sleep, I stepped into the hallway, the building's silence amplifying every sound. The elevator door stood open, maintenance lights casting eerie shadows. On the floor, a smudge of blue ink caught my eye, the same as the note. I looked up towards the 8th floor, and there, a silhouette in the dim light, tall and still, draped in a silk robe identical to Kendra's. It watched me, unmoving, before vanishing into the darkness. I retreated to my apartment, bolting the door, my mind ablaze. The threat wasn't abstract, it was personal, familial. If Lionel had been my protector, then the threat came from those I loved. But as I sat in the dark, another sound pierced the night. Footsteps in the hall, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside my door. Something slid underneath. An envelope, white and unmarked. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside, a newspaper clipping about a businessman's assassination in a financial scandal, and a note in hurried script. It all started with your husband's inheritance. Don't trust anyone. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. Who had sent this, and how deep did the betrayal run? As dawn approached, one thing was clear. The shadows and whispering pines were lengthening, and they were coming for me next.
They say the truth is like a splinter. Small at first, barely noticeable, but if you ignore it, it festers, burrowing deeper until the pain becomes unbearable, forcing you to dig it out no matter the cost. For me, Era Sterling, that splinter had embedded itself the moment Lionel slipped me that note. And now, 3 sleepless days later, It was throbbing with every heartbeat. I'd uncovered fragments of a conspiracy tied to my late husband, my daughter-in-law, and a dead man who tried to save me. But as I stared at the anonymous envelope's warning, it all started with your husband's inheritance. Don't trust anyone. I realized the infection was spreading. The building wasn't just a home anymore. It was a cage, and someone inside was tightening the bars, watching, waiting for me to make a fatal mistake. Little did I know, the next revelation would turn my suspicion into terror, proving that the eyes in the shadows were real, and they were fixed on me. The weight of insomnia pressed down like a physical force, turning my once cozy apartment into a prison of flickering lamplight and endless what-ifs. Since discovering Lionel's name in Marcus's documents, I couldn't shake the image of his desperate eyes in the elevator. He wasn't just a neighbor. He was a sentinel from my past, a guardian appointed by my husband to protect me from threats I never saw coming. The building's residents, once benign fixtures in my daily life, now seemed like actors in a sinister play. Doris's overly friendly inquiries felt probing. The Peterson twins' argument sounded staged, a distraction from something darker. And Kendra, her cold smile haunted me, a mask hiding greed and perhaps murder. I couldn't sit idle any longer. If answers existed, they were captured in the building's veins, the security cameras that watched every corner like unblinking sentinels. I knew Ethan, the young superintendent in his 20s, a quiet soul who handled maintenance with a helpful demeanor. He fixed my leaky faucet more than once, always with a shy smile. That morning, I sought him out in the dimly lit maintenance room in the basement, the air thick with the scent of oil and dust. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that danced like ghosts. "Ethan?" I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "I need a favor, something discreet." He looked up from his workbench, wiping grease from his hands. His eyes widened slightly, sensing my urgency. "Miss Sterling? Everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted, glancing over my shoulder at the empty hallway. "That man in the elevator, Lionel, he saved my life. I need to see the security footage from that day. Please?" He hesitated, his face paling. "I don't know if I should. The police already took copies and—" "Look, son," I interrupted, leaning in, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm not asking for trouble. I just need to understand why he warned me. If there's danger here, it could affect all of us." Ethan chewed his lip, then nodded reluctantly. He locked the door and booted up the ancient computer, its fan whirring like a labored breath. The screen flickered to life, displaying grainy feeds from various cameras. He fast-forwarded to the fourth-floor hallway, Lionel stepping into the elevator, me following moments later. Then, nothing. The footage jumped, a 5-minute gap, erasing the crucial moments. "See?" he said, pointing at the timestamp glitch. "It's cut. Someone tampered with it." My pulse quickened. "Who has access to these recordings?" "Only the building manager and certain owners with authorization. Like, for example, Miss Kendra Reed. She requested access 2 weeks ago, said there was a theft in her apartment." Kendra. The name hit like a thunderclap. My daughter-in-law meddling with evidence? Ethan dug deeper into the backups, zooming in on another feed from the 8th floor, just an hour before the murder. There she was, Kendra, striding through the hallway with a large black tote bag clutched tightly, her face partially obscured by sunglasses. She entered the building, then emerged 10 minutes later, hurrying away, the bag noticeably lighter. "Could you make me a copy?"
I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, adrenaline surging. Of course, but be careful, ma'am. Not everyone in this building is who they seem. His warning hung in the air as he handed me the USB drive, a small device that felt like a grenade in my palm. Back in my apartment, I locked the door and drew the curtains, the room plunging into semi-darkness. I inserted the drive into my computer, replaying the footage obsessively. Kendra's hurried steps, her evasive glance upward toward my window. It wasn't coincidence, it was calculation. If Lionel was auditing our finances tied to Marcus's discoveries of fraud, then his death wasn't random. It was silencing a witness, and I had been the intended target, spared only by his warning. I sealed the USB and Lionel's note in an envelope, hiding it in the false bottom of a desk drawer, a trick Marcus had taught me years ago for safekeeping valuables. Exhaustion finally claimed me that afternoon, but it was a fitful rest, plagued by dreams of elevators plummeting into darkness. The noise came, around 2 a.m., a faint creak that yanked me from sleep. My heart slammed against my ribs as I lay still, ear straining. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, in the living room. Barefoot and silent, I slid from bed, creeping to the doorway. In the moonlight filtering through a crack in the curtains, a shadow moved near the desk. Slender, feminine, glinting with something metallic. Key. They rummaged through the drawers, their movements frantic but controlled. I held my breath, hidden in the shadows, terror rooting me in place. Who was this intruder? How did they get in? The figure found the envelope, tucked it away, and slipped out the door as quietly as they come. I waited, counting to 10, then rushed to check. The hiding spot was empty. Racing to the hallway, I peered out, but it was deserted, save for a lingering scent. Expensive perfume, the same floral notes Kendra wore, cloying and unmistakable. Dawn brought no relief. Fury mingled with fear. I dialed Kendra's number, my voice calm but edged with steel. Kendra, we need to talk. It's about Lionel. A pause. Then her tense reply, "What does that man have to do with me?" "You tell me. I know he was your accountant, and I know about the cameras." Silence stretched, thick and ominous. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, mother-in-law." She hung up, the click echoing like a threat. That night, determination solidified. If she'd stolen the evidence, that meant I was onto something, and she was scared. I called Ethan again. "I need copies of everything, the last 3 weeks of recordings." "What's going on, ma'am?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "The truth is surfacing, and fear is changing hands." Hours later, as I pored over the new files, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Don't look anymore. Your curiosity will kill you, just like Lionel." The unknown number sent ice through my veins. I deleted it, but the words lingered, a digital specter. Glancing out the window, I saw the light in Kendra's apartment glowing like a watchful eye. She, or someone, was monitoring me, ready to strike. But I wouldn't cower. The splinter was too deep. I had to extract it. As midnight approached, another envelope slid under my door, this one containing a single key, old, rusted, with a tag reading, "Marcus's Straits." My husband's private room, untouched since his death. What secrets waited there? Heart racing, I clutched it, knowing this was the next thread to pull. But as footsteps retreated down the hall, a chilling thought struck. If allies were sending clues, enemies were surely closing in.
The game was escalating, and one wrong move could end it all.
The truth doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in like poison through a vein, slow and insidious, until it courses through every part of you, twisting what you thought you knew into something unrecognizable. For me, Era Sterling, that poison had been building since Lionel's desperate warning in the elevator, but now, with the rusted key to my husband's study clutched in my hand and anonymous threats buzzing on my phone, it was reaching a fever pitch. I'd uncovered fraud, betrayal, and a murder tied to my own family. Yet the deeper I dug, the more I realized the rot went further, into the heart of those I loved most. As I turned that key in the lock, the door creaking open to reveal secrets long buried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer the hunter. I was the prey, and the predator was circling closer, ready to strike when I least expected. But in the shadows of whispering pines, alliances were fracturing, and one wrong trust could be my undoing. The study hadn't been touched since Marcus's death 6 years ago, a room frozen in time, the air heavy with the scent of aged paper, polished wood, and faint traces of his cologne that lingered like a ghost. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light from the hallway as I stepped inside, my fingers trembling on the key. The anonymous envelope had appeared under my door like a specter, its contents a silent command to unearth what my husband had hidden. Why now? Who was guiding me or luring me into a trap? The question swirled as I flicked on the desk lamp, its warm glow illuminating stacks of folders, yellowed letters, and the old leather chair where Marcus had spent countless evenings poring over documents. I started with the desk drawers, my heart pounding with each creak of wood. Bills, old photographs, nothing out of the ordinary, until I found a sealed envelope tucked in the back, my name scrawled in Marcus's familiar handwriting. Era, if something happens to me. A shiver raced down my spine, cold as winter's breath. Tearing it open, I read the words that shattered my world anew. Era, if something happens to me, find Lionel Evans. He's the only one I trust. The letter detailed suspicions of fraud, shell companies siphoning family assets, orchestrated by Kendra and her relatives. Lionel, an auditor Marcus had secretly hired, was compiling evidence. He'll protect you if I can't. Don't let them win. Tears blurred my vision as rage ignited in my chest. Marcus's accident, the car crash I'd mourned as fate, now reeked of foul play. Had Kendra orchestrated it to silence him? And Darius, my son, blinded by love or complicity? The folder marked Tendra Reed spilled more horrors. Contracts with forged signatures, transfers to offshore accounts, photographs of meetings with shady figures. Marcus knew, and he tried to stop it, but death had claimed him first, leaving Lionel as my unwitting guardian until he too was silenced. The revelations fueled a fire in me, but I needed proof to confront them. I called Ethan, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I need your help again, son. Bring your laptop. We're reviewing everything. He arrived that evening, his face etched in worry as he sat up in my living room. Did you find something? He asked, plugging in the drive. Too much, I whispered, but I can't prove it alone. Together, we scoured the backups. One recording from the night before the murder showed Kendra slipping into the building manager's office, her movements furtive under the camera's eye. She swapped a USB drive, tampering with the system, erasing her trails. She's covering up, Ethan murmured, zooming on her face illuminated by the screen's glow. Not just the murder, but whatever Lionel knew. As we worked into the night, the apartment felt like a fortress under siege. I kept the lights low, curtains drawn, every shadow a potential intruder. Kendra didn't know I had duplicates of the evidence, and that sliver of advantage was my only shield. But Darius, my son, defending her blindly, I had to tell him, to shatter the illusion before it consumed us all.
The next morning I called him, my tone firm. Son, come over. We need to talk. Alone. He arrived looking haggard, dark circles under his eyes. Mom, if this is about Kendra again... Listen without interrupting, I cut in, guiding him to the couch. Your father didn't die in an accident. His face paled as I laid out the documents, the recordings, Lionel's role. Kendra was involved in fraud. Lionel was going to expose it. That's why he was killed. And I think she targeted me next. He exploded, jumping to his feet. Stop it, Mom. This is delusional. Kendra wouldn't... I'm not inventing this, I insisted, playing the footage. She tampered with evidence. She knew Lionel was a threat. He watched, fury giving way to doubt, then fear. You're wrong, he muttered, but his voice cracked. Deep down, I saw the crack in his denial, the terror that it might be true. That night, my phone rang. Kendra. Her voice was low, venomous. What did you tell Darius, stirring up the past like this? People who do that end up buried with it. Is that a threat? I shot back, gripping the receiver. Advice, she hissed, hanging up. The line went dead, but her words echoed a chilling promise. She was shedding her mask, no longer pretending. Fear morphed into resolve. I wouldn't let her intimidate me. At midnight, as rain pattered against the windows, another envelope slid under my door. My pulse raced as I snatched it up. A single sentence in familiar, hurried script. Don't confront her alone. Wait for my signal. The handwriting matched Lionel's, down to the slant of the letters. Impossible. Was he alive? Had he faked his death? Or was this a cruel trick, someone mimicking him to manipulate me? I clutched the note to my chest, hope and dread warring inside. If Lionel had survived, the game changed. If not, an ally was carrying out his plan, and I had to trust the unknown. The message ignited a plan. I couldn't face Kendra head on, not yet. Instead, I'd lure her into the open, a family dinner. Innocent on the surface, a trap beneath. I called Darius, feigning warmth. Son, it's been too long since we've shared a meal. Invite Kendra. Let's put this tension behind us. He hesitated. Are you sure, after everything? Tell her it'll be quiet, just family. I hung up, taking a deep breath. Quiet? It will be a storm. The night of the dinner arrived, tension thick as fog. I set the table meticulously, white cloth gleaming china, candles flickering like wary eyes. Under the tablecloth, I hid a black folder, the compiled evidence, documents, recordings, notes. Ethan arrived early as planned. A family friend, I'd introduce him, but his role was key, the tech-savvy witness to project the truth. The doorbell rang. Darius entered first, strained smile in place. Kendra followed, resplendent in a red dress and her eyes scanning the room like a predator assessing territory. Everything looks lovely, mother-in-law, she purred, fingers tracing the china. I didn't know you had it in you to play hostess amid all this. There's always something to celebrate, especially when masks start to fall. She chuckled, oblivious, as Ethan greeted her politely. Dinner progressed in strained bites, small talks fracturing under the weight of unspoken accusations. Kendra poured wine, her hands betraying a slight tremor, a crack in her facade. Darius, I said, voice cutting through the tension. Remember the man in the elevator? He nodded uncomfortably. I've learned something. I placed the folder on the table. Kendra's face drained of color. What is that? She demanded, her voice trembling. The truth? Ethan activated his laptop, projecting the tempered footage on the wall. Kendra swapping dries, her guilt captured in pixels. Darius bolted up. What does this mean? It means she erased the evidence of Lionel's murder. She silenced him because he knew about the fraud, your father's discoveries. Silence crashed like a wave. Kendra, tell me it's not true, Darius pleaded. She screamed denial, but Ethan revealed more. Modified financial files, transfers in her name. Kendra crumpled, tears streaming, but her eyes held no remorse, only defeat. The phone rang suddenly. Ethan answered, passing it to me. An unknown voice. It's done.
The file has been delivered. She won't escape. I hung up, turning to Kendra. Justice is coming. She erupted in accusations, but Darius shattered, tuned to her heart. Officers arrived soon after, cuffing her amid her wails. The building watched in hushed awe as she was led away. Ethan whispered, "Did we do the right thing?" I replied, but as silence returned, a new dread bloomed. The note from Lionel, the unresolved threads. Kendra's arrest was a victory, but whispers of deeper betrayal lingered. What if this was just the prelude? As I stared at the empty table, a shadow shifted in the hallway, watching, waiting. The poison wasn't purged, it was mutating, and the final dose was yet to come.
They say the final twist of the knife isn't the one that draws blood. It's the one that reveals the hand holding it, forcing you to confront not just the betrayal, but the love that blinded you to it. For me, Eris Sterling, the days after Kendra's arrest were a fragile calm before the storm's true fury, a deceptive peace shattered by a single phone call that dragged me back into the abyss. I thought exposing her fraud and Lionel's murder would bring closure. But as I sat in the dim visiting room of the detention center, staring through the glass at the woman who'd poisoned my family, I realized the web of lies extended further, ensnaring my own son in its threads. The truth, once a splinter, had become a blade, and it was poised to carve out the last remnants of my heart. But in the echoes of that pain, redemption waited, not in vengeance, but in the quiet surrender to what must be faced. And as the shadows of whispering pines finally began to lift, I wondered, could forgiveness heal the wounds, or would it only leave scars that never fade? 3 days had passed since the disastrous family dinner. 3 days of hollow silence where the building's whispers had faded to an uneasy quiet. No more anonymous envelopes, no lurking silhouettes in the hallways, just the weight of what I'd unleashed. Darius hadn't returned home, his absence a gaping wound. I understood. The revelations had shattered him, forcing him to question the life he'd built with Kendra. Meals sat untouched on my table. Sleep came in fractured bursts, haunted by Lionel's eyes and Marcus's voice from beyond the grave. The evidence folder, now safely duplicated and shared with the authorities, felt like a pirate victory. Justice was grinding forward, but at what cost to my soul? The call came on a gray afternoon, the sky heavy with unshed rain. "Miss Eris Sterling," a firm voice inquired. "Inmate Kendra Reed requests a visit. She claims she has something to confess." My first instinct was refusal. Why give her the satisfaction? But curiosity, that relentless pull, won out. Perhaps in her desperation, she'd reveal the missing pieces. The detention center loomed like a fortress of regret, its halls echoing with the clang of metal doors and muffled voices. The air reeked of damp concrete and disinfectant, a stark contrast to Kendra's once polished world. Through the thick glass partition, she appeared transformed, pale, disheveled, her arrogant gaze replaced by hollow desperation. No makeup, no silk robe, just a woman stripped bare, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice tinny through the receiver, laced with a tremor I hadn't heard before. "I didn't come for you," I replied coldly, meeting her eyes without flinching. "I came for the truth, whatever scraps you're willing to offer." She took a deep breath, glancing nervously at the guard. "I didn't kill Lionel." The words hung in the air, a bombshell disguised as a whisper. I leaned forward, skepticism sharpening my tone. "And you expect me to believe that, after the fraud, the tampering, the threats?" "Listen," she urged, her knuckles white on the phone. "Lionel knew about the schemes, yes, but he also knew things about your son. Darius, he did it." The world tilted, a dizzying spin that left me breathless. "What are you saying?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. Darius panicked. Lionel was going to expose everything, ruin our lives. Darius confronted him in the elevator after you got out. They fought. It was an accident, a hard blow. He hit his head. I arrived later, tried to cover it up, deleted recordings, hid evidence. All for him, Era, not me. Lies, I spat, but doubt crept in like fog, clouding my certainty. Why confess now? Because I won't go down alone, she said, a chilling glint in her eyes. And because I want a deal. Help me get out, and I'll give you something Marcus left, a recording. He knew trouble was coming and entrusted it to me. But if I rot here, it vanishes. The guard signal time was up. Kendra hung up, standing with a smirk. If you think you've won, you're wrong. Your family is stained. Lionel only uncovered half. She walked away, leaving me frozen, her words a venom that seeped into my veins. Was this manipulation, her final play, or the truth I'd been too blind to see? Back home, my mind waged war. Darius hadn't answered my calls, his silence now ominous. I revisited the evidence, zooming in on the elevator footage's reflection. A tall, masculine shadow, familiar in its posture, the curve of shoulders I'd hugged 1,000 times. It was him, Darius. The realization hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Kendra hadn't lied entirely. My son was entangled, perhaps the killer himself. That night, rain lashed the windows as insomnia gripped me tighter. Memories flooded in. Darius as a child curling into my side during storms, whispering fears of monsters. I'd promised to protect him always. But now facing the monster he'd become, that promise felt like chains. Near dawn, the doorbell rang, an insistent buzz that jolted me. Peering through the peephole, I saw him, disheveled, eyes hollow, rain-soaked. My son. "Mom," he whispered as I opened the door. "I need to talk." Love warred with betrayal as I let him in. He collapsed on the sofa, hands clasped, silence stretched like a chasm. "Kendra told you," he said finally, voice breaking. "Yes," I replied, steeling myself. "Tell me from you." Tears welled as he confessed. The confrontation, the argument over Lionel's evidence, the push that turned fatal. "It was an accident, Mom. I panicked, called Kendra. She covered it up." His sobs filled the room, a boy's cry in a man's body. "You already lost me," I said, the words escaping in anguish. But as he hugged me, trembling, maternal instinct softened the rage. "I can't promise forgiveness, but I'll try." "I've decided," he said, pulling away. "I'm turning myself in. I can't live with this lie." My world crumbled further, but pride flickered amid the pain. "Do it with dignity," I whispered. After he left, I sat before Marcus's portrait whispering pleas for guidance. The next morning, the prosecutor called, a recovered recording from Kendra's files. Marcus's voice filled the room, warnings about Kendra, pleas to protect Darius. "If you must choose between truth and our son, save his soul." Tears streamed as I realized Marcus had foreseen it all, his love a beacon through the darkness. Darius's trial was a blur of testimonies and evidence. He confessed partially, the judge lenient on intent, sentencing him to a reduced term. I attended every day, a silent pillar of support. In his final statement, "Everything I am, good and bad, I learned from my mother." Redemption in words, a balm on wounds. 2 years later, he was released, aged but humbled. We embraced, no words needed. Forgiveness had become our shared breath. Kendra divorced him from prison, fading into irrelevance. Months passed. Life stirred anew in whispering pines. One afternoon, a young woman approached, Lionel's daughter, bearing a pendant inscribed, 10 minutes can change a life. "Dad said you gave him a clean conscience," she said, tears in her eyes. "No," I replied. "He gave me strength." The pendant, a final gift, symbolized those pivotal seconds in the elevator,
Lionel's sacrifice altering my fate. As I write this, sunlight filters through my window, the elevator humming innocently below. Darius calls weakly, his voice serene, letter signed with truth. Pain lingers, but peace prevails. The truth arrived late, but it freed us. In redemption's echo, I whisper thanks to Lionel, Marcus, and life itself. For in losing everything, I found the love that endures. Sometimes, all it takes is one note to rewrite a destiny. And those scars remain. They tell a story of survival, not defeat. The shadows have lifted, but their lessons endure. Trust sparingly, love fiercely, and never fear the truth's light.